Well, good afternoon and greetings from Big Sky Country. And I want to thank Leroy for the introduction. And you've had a rock star lineup so far. I've seen some of your speakers already. I can tell you Ryan Zinke, our Secretary of Interior. Ryan and I were at Boys State together in 1979. He was a junior, soon to be a senior at Whitefish High School. I was a junior, soon to be a senior at Bozeman High School. And our keynote speaker that year was a guy named Max Baucus, who was just elected to the U.S. Senate in 1978. And of course, this is now June of 1979. So I don't think either that kid from Whitefish or the kid from Bozeman, as we're listening to Senator Baucus then share about Washington, D.C. and the Senate, that we'd ever be back here working together. Montana has 56 counties. I traveled to each one of the counties every congressional period. So I just wrapped up my fourth time that I've done this. You've heard about Chuck Grassley's, the 99 county tour that Chuck does. So it's 56 counties in Montana. And as a kid growing up, I remember we used to play license plate bingo, because before we got the vanity plates and the specialized plates, you used to know which county every vehicle was from, because the first digit or two identified the county and the rest identified your vehicle. That's not the case anymore. But most recently, I was in counties 54, 55, 56. I was out in Hysham, Winnett, and Jordan. Now, if you're from Montana, in fact, some Montanans don't know where Hysham, Winnett, and Jordan are, depending on what part of the state you're from. But it's a long ways from places like Bozeman, which is now the fastest growing micropolitan in America. Micropolitan defined as 50,000 in population or less. Bozeman's the fastest growing. It's been my hometown since 1964. It was 13,000 people when Mom and Dad moved there in 64. Mom and Dad grew up in Billings, Montana. And so it's important, though, you get to places like the Gallatin County, where you have the growth, the prosperity. It's where we started up our cloud computing company and took it public, and Oracle now has acquired the company, as a significant presence there. So you have these pockets of prosperity in places like Bozeman. And Kalispell is the third fastest growing micropolitan in America, up in the Flathead. The backdrop is Glacier National Park. That's where Ryan Zinke grew up. Bozeman has the backdrop of Yellowstone National Park, where I grew up. But then you have other counties out there that typically are in the bottom 10% as it relates to per capita income in the nation. In fact, sometimes it's worse than that. Unemployment rates can be higher. Incomes is a huge issue. As you travel around the state, you see the diverse nature of our state, and that's why this energy discussion, I think, is so appropriate, because Montana is truly a very diverse state as it relates to our energy portfolio. And you're reminded of the diversity of our state when you go through small towns. In fact, I was out in Circle, Montana recently driving through, and there was a veterinarian and a taxidermist that decided, it's hard to make a living in eastern Montana, that went together and joined forces. And on the sign in front of their shop there, it said, "No matter what happens, you're getting your dog back." And that was so. But it's truly for Montanans, it is, we have to scrap at it. We have to play scrappy ball to make ends meet in our state. All you have to do is look at the Class C basketball scores in tournament time for girls and boys basketball when it comes to March. There's a great Montana public PBS documentary. It's 10 years old now, called Class C, the only game in town. It really tells a story of a half a dozen girls basketball teams in Class C. That's our smallest classification, and their progress all the way through the state championship. But it really tells a story of the struggles of rural Montana, the struggles in many, many ways. And you see that when you see consolidated communities where they literally have to put three communities together with hyphens between them to put a basketball team on the court. That's why what we're all doing here, what you all are doing here, relates to clean energy, reliable, affordable, clean energy is so important. And I want to thank the National Hydropower Association, the critical work it does relating to our energy agenda. In fact, Harry Truman said this in 1948. He said, without the Pacific Northwest federal hydro system, it would have almost been impossible to win World War II. And of course, when you're out in places like Montana, where the three forks of the Missouri come together, in fact, just 30 miles west of where I grew up in Bozeman, there's a little place called Three Forks. It's only fitting. Lewis and Clark came through there, where you see the Madison, the Jefferson, the Gallatin rivers come together at that moment, and that's where the Missouri starts. And then, of course, it feeds its way across the state and eventually into the Mississippi. But we are kind of the headwaters relates to where the snowpack is, and that's why we have great hydropower potential. In fact, hydropower is about 36% of our energy portfolio in Montana. We're the 5th largest hydroelectric producer in the United States. But we can do more, and we should do more. We're doing a lot of work here to try to improve efficiencies of the existing assets. We need to work to expedite some of these burdensome laws and regulations, review processes that frankly are not adding any value. In fact, it's costing a lot of money, trying to renew permits. The Gibson Dam was an example of that. We just signed that into law. It was a long battle there in Montana. But that's the very reason we need to expedite the review process. The FERC process took so long that I had to introduce a bill to get it done. That tells you have something wrong when Congress can actually outrun FERC with getting something done here in this town. It relates to wind. Now, we talked about the hydro potential in Montana. We get a lot of snow. We love to recycle our snow. We love to ski on it, and then we fish on it. We use energy with it. My idea of a great winter day is spending time skiing. A great idea of a summer day is spending time fly fishing on some of our great rivers of southwest Montana. And then we have wind. About 8% of our power portfolio in Montana is produced by wind. And when you drive through Montana, increasingly see more and more wind farms. In fact, according to the Department of Energy, I'm not quoting the Montana Chamber of Commerce, but the DOE says that Montana has one of the highest potentials for wind development in the nation. We're second to Texas. That's because, again, you got the mountains there, you got the winds that come off the front, and it's a great place for wind farms. And solar, they call Montana big sky country for a reason. We get a lot of blue sky days year-round. The northwest part of our state's more difficult. It has a little more of that northwest climate that tends to be a little cloudier. It's a little more temperate, a little warmer. Warmer is a relative phrase in Montana, but it's warmer than places more where I'm from and to the east where it's a little more arid, and you have these beautiful bluebird days in the wintertime, get a snowfall and have that bright blue sky, but there's great solar potential in Montana. In fact, Montana has one of the largest proposed on the drawing board solar projects in the Pacific Northwest, and details are continuing to develop. Natural gas. If you kind of brag about your state here a little bit, we have the largest underground natural gas storage unit in the nation. More than half of Montana households use natural gas as their primary heating source. Very important to us. In fact, it's natural gas usage has led to America's reduction in carbon emissions, 14% since 2005. And natural gas production is also good for national security. Over the course of the last 6 months, and I'll talk about this a little bit more in just a few moments as I close, but I've been over to China twice and to Russia once since April. I used to work in China. My years at Procter & Gamble, I spent 6 years working in Guangzhou for Procter & Gamble. And the incredible importance we have here relates to energy and national security, and particularly for natural gas. When you think about 30% of Europe's natural gas is coming from Russia, 50% of Germany's. It allows the United States to be a reliable supplier to meet Europe's energy needs. And I think most in this room might agree that the world would be a better place, Europe would be more secure if their dependency shifted to the United States instead of Vladimir Putin. We also have a lot of work to do. We need to streamline some of the permitting, particularly relates to some of our public land permitting. We need to kickstart biomass production, another great potential energy source. I talked about the faster approvals of hydropower licenses, much needed. We need to get WRDA across the finish line as soon as possible. Always have this mashup at the end of the federal fiscal year here, September 30th, but I think it's going to happen pretty soon. We'll see where that all goes. Stay tuned. But lastly, as I mentioned, I spent a lot of time in my career managing global businesses. I'm a fifth-generation Montana, a great-grandma homestead up in northern Montana, and family's been in southwest Montana for most of my life, almost all my life, 55 of 56 years. But as I look at the globe and you look what's going on in China, when I was there doing business, it was a $500 billion economy when I moved there in 1992 with my wife and then 2 small children. Today, China is a $12 trillion economy. In fact, in spending some time with Jack Ma and Alibaba here in Hangzhou with some other senators in April, Jack Ma said we should have the G2 and the G200. Think about the U.S. economy at 19 trillion, Chinese economy at 12 trillion, then it drops off to Japan at about sub $5 trillion. The two big dogs in the neighborhood right now are China and the United States. Not only today, but as we project this long term with economic growth models, those are going to be the two predominant biggest powerhouses economically in the world. Here's the concern. As we speak today, 4 of the 5 largest banks in the world are in China. The top 4 are all Chinese. 5th is in Japan. 6th is JP Morgan. 3 of the top 6 internet companies are in China. You know, we talk about Amazon and Google, so we get the gold medal, the silver medal. Then you have companies that some of you have heard of, some of you may not have heard of JD.com, of Alibaba, which I mentioned Jack Ma and his company in Hangzhou, Tencent. These are huge, huge internet companies. And China's graduating 8 times more STEM graduates than we are here in America. So you think about where this all goes, that becomes a very important part of our overall thinking as it relates to national security as well as winning in the economy. But why do I bring that up? Because as we think long term in the job that I get allowed to do as a senator from Montana, you look at a myriad of issues, energy issues, and domestic policy issues, and foreign policy issues. So think about how do we win long term? Those of you in business, and I spent most of my career there, what are your long-term competitive differentiators you can sustain to win long term with the challenge of China at the moment? I would argue the United States has 3. The first is freedom. The second's the rule of law. And the third is energy. And as I've stepped back and think about this a lot, around how do we win long term, we are uniquely positioned. When we sing America the Beautiful and God shed his grace on thee, America, that with our wind potential, solar potential, hydro potential, natural gas, and all the above energy portfolio, we are uniquely positioned to win long term. Yes, freedom. Yes, rule of law. And yes, energy. I think it's that important. It needs to rise up to a geopolitical discussion and not just a discussion. I think we need to make that discussion bigger than it is today, I guess is my point on that. So anyway, thank you for your attentiveness. Thank you for coming here today, and look forward to continuing to work to build out Montana's all the above energy portfolio. And just know we do really have all the above in Montana. Thank you.